Why is there no nation that can match Russia in terms of protracted warfare, and what is left for Ukraine? Have you ever pondered why Afghanistan was once able to weaken the Soviet Union through protracted warfare, yet today's Ukraine cannot do the same to Russia? When the Russo-Ukrainian conflict commenced, the US and NATO aimed to drag Russia into a wearisome war of attrition to sap its strength and mire it in an inescapable quagmire. Now, nearly 2 years into the war, not only has Russia's GDP not fallen, but it has in fact doubled, rising from 10th to 8th in the world rankings. Russia's military-industrial production lines are nearing capacity, and its material reserves are ampler than the entirety of NATO combined. In other words, the previous calculations of the US and NATO have utterly fallen through. The combatant nation of Russia genuinely harbors no fear of enduring combat. The Western claim that Russia cannot win a war of attrition against Ukraine is a strategic deception and misrepresentation. First and foremost, Russia has yet to fully leverage its war potential. It operates on two fronts: mobilizing a portion of its own capacity while adopting a strategy of using war to fuel war, subsequently consolidating its strength immediately after capturing Ukrainian territory. For instance, after the capture of Mariupol, the Azovstal Iron and Steel Works, Europe's largest and formerly belonging to Ukraine, was seized by Russian forces. It has since resumed production and now serves as a forward steel supply base for the Russian military. Following the takeover of Kherson Oblast, the local fields have provided a continual supply of grain to Russian forces, obviating the need for long-haul transport and allowing direct local resupply. As long as the battlefield remains in Ukraine, no matter how protracted the war, it is Ukraine's vitality that is being sapped without causing Russia significant harm. Moreover, the more Ukraine depletes, the deeper it falls, and as such, cannot overcome Russia. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Russia, akin to a landlord's eldest son, inherited nearly 70% of the assets. Ukraine, the second son, nearly clinched the remaining 30%. Their heavy industries were, in fact, diligently established by the Soviet Union and are perfectly compatible with Russia, whether in terms of model or direction. Hence, after occupying eastern Ukraine, the Russian military swiftly took over the most critical Ukrainian industrial bases without any resistance. This is the fundamental reason for Ukraine's reliance on NATO military support. Steelworks, nuclear power plants, and military factories that could withstand the ravages of war have almost all fallen into Russian hands. The remaining few large mechanical manufacturing facilities have also been destroyed by bombardment. In modern warfare, loss of industrial support renders one an insignificant player. Now, Ukraine has become the clown among clowns, unable to safeguard its original industrial foundations, and instead has sold its most important national assets, thousands of state-owned enterprises, to the Americans. This equates to severing Ukraine's lifeline for decades to come. Without roots, how can one fight a protracted war? Thus, between Russia and Ukraine, it is evidently not Russia that fears the drain of resources. They had long prepared for a long-term attrition, even accounting for losses. With an annual death toll of 100,000, they can still continue to fight against Ukraine up until 2026, and we're only in the second year now. The US and Europe have already begun to balk at supplying further aid to Ukraine, which implies they also lack the resources to continue their offensive against Ukraine. The combined ammunition production lines of the whole of Europe fall short of 1/10 of Russia's capacity. Even the Pentagon has repeatedly issued red alerts, stating that ammunition reserve levels at America's large military depots are critically low. Moreover, with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict unresolved, the U.S. prioritizes support for Israel, a major strategic partner, and cannot spare the resources to plug the gaps in Ukraine. The dwindling military support for Ukraine from the U.S. and NATO underscores a simple truth. Russia is hardly in a perilous state. Why is that? Is Russia indeed more robust than the Soviet Union was? To understand, one has to look at the differences. The Russo-Ukrainian War differs significantly from the 1979 Afghan War regarding the duration, scale, and complexity of combat. Back then, the Soviet Union's ill-fated decision to invade Afghanistan resulted in a 10-year conflict, whereas the Russo-Ukrainian War has not even reached 2 years, making a comparison of the depletion caused by each war insensible. If battling Ukraine is considered a difficult level, then fighting Afghanistan at that time would be akin to a hellish level. Afghanistan is a landlocked and extremely poor country. Any big brother attacking it would have to invest immensely. Even if territorial gains are made, substantial effort must be put forth to maintain control, which is why Afghanistan became known as the graveyard of empires. Regardless of the strength of the opponent, the longer one fights there, the costlier it becomes. A veritable bottomless pit that steadily drains a great power's wealth. Thus, it was Afghanistan where the Soviet Union was bogged down for 10 years, hastening its own decline. America battled Afghanistan for 20 years, spending a colossal $2.3 trillion in military expenditures and losing thousands of soldiers, ultimately leading to withdrawal. The immense difficulty faced by both superpowers illustrates Afghanistan's resistance. In contrast, Ukraine is the granary of Europa, possessing a substantial inheritance from the Soviet Union, including a very solid industrial foundation, whether in coal, steel, energy, or port transportation, all crucial assets during a war. When fighting them, capturing a territory translates directly into resource acquisition, allowing for a self-sustaining effort without fear of depletion. And what are the main resources expended in a war of attrition, if not steel, energy, and food? Russia is therefore not intimidated by a sustained conflict with Ukraine, or indeed any other country, because the Russian nation is known for its resilience. Russia is the largest country in the world by land area, a major power in energy and agriculture, with ample military resources, strategic depth, combat capability, and experience. They lack nothing. Historically, Russia has demonstrated its advantage in sustaining long wars. They excel at wearing down their opponents in early stages, playing the long game and then striking fiercely in a second-half comeback. Just consider how Napoleon was defeated, how Stalin overcame Hitler, and how nearly 700,000 Japanese Kwantung Army soldiers were annihilated by the Soviet military, all through attrition warfare. Looking back further, let's analyze the Russo-Japanese Wars, where history saw them clash 3 times. The first was the Battle of the Yellow Sea in 1904, marking the first direct naval engagement between Russia and Japan. Under the command of Heihachiro Togo, the Japanese combined fleet annihilated the Russian Imperial Navy's Pacific Fleet. To the Western world, Japan was then a backwards nation of the Orient, yet it managed to challenge the colossal and advanced Russian Empire. An incredible feat indeed. Nicholas II of Russia, unable to swallow the humiliation, rebuilt the Pacific Fleet to reclaim lost honor. In 1905, a fierce naval battle erupted in the Tsushima Strait, where Togo triumphed yet again. At the cost of just 3 torpedo boats, he destroyed 2/3 of the Russian battleship fleet, causing Russia to permanently lose its naval supremacy in the Yellow Sea. After being defeated twice by Japan, Russia faced immense pressure from Japan to pay enormous war indemnities. However, Nicholas II ignored Japan's demands, responding with, "I will not pay you a penny. If you want to fight, we will continue to fight." Russia had the capacity to last in a protracted war, while Japan, exhausted after 2 sea battles, had no strength to continue and had to stop. Come August 1945, the Soviet Union extraordinarily redeemed its past humiliations against Japan in the Russo-Japanese Wars by declaring war and dispatching the Far Eastern forces, which totally wiped out close to 700,000 Japanese Imperial Army soldiers of the Kwantung Army. The Soviet Union was able to achieve such a sweeping victory because at that point it was akin to a giant facing a dwarf. How could the disparity between Russia and Japan become so vast? It's because, after enduring a protracted conflict against Germany, the Soviet Union had not only defeated Hitler decisively, but also significantly bolstered its own military might. At the onset of World War II, the Soviet military could barely withstand the German Wehrmacht, which advanced all the way to the outskirts of Moscow, putting Stalin at risk of national extinction. Yet Stalin remained unflustered, boosting morale by personally reviewing the troops. Each time a group army was lost, he made prompt arrangements for the next one to seamlessly take its place. Just as Hitler rejoiced upon scattering 1 million Soviet troops, Stalin swiftly assembled another brand-new million-strong army, driving the opponent to despair because the Soviets' steel torrent seemed unending. The true strength of a superpower was vividly demonstrated by the Soviet Union, with solid data, plentiful troops, relentless output of steel, coal, and oil. As long as these figures continued to rise, the Soviet Union would not be defeated. Consider this. The Soviet Union's military strength was only 4.2 million in 1940, soaring to 12.8 million by 1945. A threefold increase. These weren't merely expendable materials, but robust living soldiers ready for combat. In stark contrast, Nazi Germany's forces had dwindled to 2 million, nearly a six-fold disparity in numbers. How could they continue to fight? The Soviet Union could endure the loss of 30 million casualties. Could Germany withstand a loss of 5 million without facing national extinction? This was the difference in their foundational depths. Besides having a sufficient force, the Soviet Union's arsenal was also formidable. Even after the lengthy Second World War, their tank count consistently exceeded 100,000 units, and aircraft numbers were over 60,000. Everything indicated that when a superpower operates at full capacity, it can endure repeated local failures, 10, 20 times or more. As long as the resources and manpower don't dry up, they can continue fighting indefinitely. Even a single successful counterattack can alter the outcome. Even after an entire generation was lost to the war against the Nazi forces, the Soviet Union still had millions of soldiers and seemingly inexhaustible supplies. If even Germany could not match them, how could Japan, a tiny nation by comparison, have the audacity to wage a prolonged war against them? This was the natural chasm between the strength of a great power and a smaller nation. Therefore, after combat operations against Japan, the Soviet Union quickly washed away the shame of the Russo-Japanese naval battles, occupied the Kuril Islands, and exerted tremendous pressure on Japanese fascism, advancing Japan's surrender and the end of World War II. Whether against France, Germany, or Japan, history has repeatedly proven that Russia truly does not fear a war of attrition. For countries like Ukraine, which has handed its destiny and future to others, a thorny path surely lays ahead. Having heard this far, do you still believe Ukraine can continue the war of attrition? Thanks. Please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, share, and support the Knowledge Nook.